Hey witches, I'm Blair Bathory and this is the Something Scary podcast. Thank you so much for being here, whether this is your first time or you're one of the brave souls who join us every week. Many of us are so excited to get our first summertime job. It means money for the things we want and a first stab at adulting. But with that comes grueling, sometimes late hours, and new responsibility. These new challenges can open our worlds to the horrors that lurk around us every day, from encountering dangerous individuals to brushes with the supernatural. The world of work can unveil unexpected horrors. So for those embarking on their first job journey, a word of caution: be vigilant. First, you've been clowned, followed by dream job or nightmare. Finally, in our featured story, Midnight Delivery from Hell. Before we get to our stories, I wanted to ask if you would take a minute to rate and review this podcast. You can pause here and do it right now, or you can do it after you've listened. It's one of the ways you can help Something Scary continue to grow, and it only takes a minute. Thank you so much, witches. We are incredibly grateful for the support of all of our listeners. So, want to hear something scary? Summer job nightmares. There's always a learning curve with a new job, but some things are too horrifying to ever get used to, like in this version of a well-known urban legend inspired by Ellie. Lily's heart raced as she stepped into the dimly lit entranceway of the house. She was about to babysit for the first time. She was only 14, but landing her first babysitting job felt like a huge deal, and she couldn't contain her excitement or her trepidation at trying something new for the first time. She was finally going to be able to save up money for the clothes she wanted to buy and maybe even stash some cash aside for college. She wasn't going to let anything mess up this opportunity. The baby's mother greeted her warmly at the door, offering a reassuring smile that did little to calm the nervous butterflies in Lily's stomach. After a brief introduction, the mother outlined important details about the baby's routines and allergies. She pointed out a monitor in the kitchen that was set up with a camera in the baby's room. And finally, she left out some snacks for Lily before saying goodbye for the evening. Alone in the house, Lily tiptoed to the nursery where the baby lay peacefully asleep, ensuring she was comfortable before leaving her alone. She made her way through the house. She couldn't shake an uneasy feeling that lingered in the air. She realized she had never been left alone in a house before, certainly not in charge of an infant. She figured the quiet and unfamiliarity made it even creepier than it was. At least that's what she told herself. Reaching the restroom, her heart pounded as she pushed the door open, the creak echoing through the silent house. The bathroom was dark, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of the hallway behind her. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, they fell upon a peculiar sight, a silhouette lurking in the corner. She whipped around to face the figure. A gasp escaped Lily's lips as fear clenched her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to run from whatever lurked in the darkness. With trembling hands, she fumbled for the light switch. With a click, the room flooded with light, revealing the source of her dread. A clown statue, its painted grin frozen in a macabre expression. Relief washed over Lily in a wave as she realized the innocuous silhouette was just a figurine. She let out a nervous laugh, chastising herself for getting worked up into a tizzy. "It's just a statue," she muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. She then approached the clown, examining it closely. Its exaggerated features seemed almost comical in the harsh light, a stark contrast to the terror it had inspired moments before. With a dismissive wave of her hand, Lily turned away. But as she reached for the door handle, the nagging sense of unease crept over her once more. Something about the clown's twisted grin seemed to taunt her, to mock her sense of security. Lily pushed the feeling aside, but decided she should use a different bathroom. With a deep breath, she turned off the light and headed out. She jumped when she heard her cell phone ringing. She ran as fast as she could to reach her bag. The last thing she needed was for her to wake up the baby. She quickly answered, and it was the baby's mother, just checking in. Lily happily reported that her daughter was still asleep and all was well. Except, of course, she added lightly, she'd frightened herself with the clown statue. To Lily's horror, the mother replied, "I don't have any statues." Her voice tinged with concern. Panic gripped Lily as she ran back to the bathroom and saw the clown had vanished. Without a moment's hesitation, she hung up the phone and darted to the kitchen to check the security monitor for the baby's bedroom. Frantically scrolling through the surveillance footage, her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the unthinkable unfold. There, on the screen, was the clown statue, alive, moving, and wielding a gleaming kitchen knife. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she watched in terror as the clown crept toward the sleeping baby, its evil intentions clear. Grabbing for her phone, Lily dialed 911, her voice shaky as she relayed the horrifying scene unfolding before her. The operator assured her that help was on the way, but time seemed to stand still as she watched the clown draw closer to the innocent child. Approaching sirens shattered the silence. The clown acknowledged the sound with a nod of its head. Then, with a swift motion, pressed the blade against the baby's fragile neck, drawing blood as the infant woke with a piercing cry. Heart pounding, Lily ran from the kitchen, terrified but desperate to protect the child in her care. But as she reached the nursery, she found only an empty crib, the clown nowhere to be seen. The baby's cries echoed through the house as Lily frantically searched every room, her mind reeling with fear and confusion. When the mother arrived, she found Lily clutching the sobbing infant in front of a closet, both shaken but miraculously alive. Racing to the hospital, they breathed a sigh of relief as doctors assured them the baby would recover from the superficial wound. But the horror of that night would haunt Lily forever. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the memory of the sinister clown lingered in the back of Lily's mind and in her nightmares. She always felt like someone was watching her, like if she turned around, there the clown would be, ready to attack her. She had to give up the babysitting money and expensive clothes, but her peace of mind was worth it. What was your first job? What were the pitfalls of the job that made you nervous? Was it anything spooky or supernatural? Popular culture would have us believe being a lifeguard is the quintessential all-American perfect vacation job. But when something desperately sought is so easily gained, maybe there's more to the role than meets the eye. It was the summer before college, and being a lifeguard at the local pool should have meant I'd not only start my freshman year with some spare cash, but I'd also be fit, healthy, and have an awesome tan. That was my plan anyway. But if I'd grown up in this town, I would have known better. Maybe I would have heard the stories at the middle school sleepovers, but I didn't know. The job itself was fine. Sure, it was hard work as you'd expect. It was a blazing hot summer, and the pool was full most of the day with families, teens, couples, just about anyone and everyone trying to cool off some. Busy days meant time went fast. Most evenings after closing checks, a bunch of us headed out for food or just to hang out. It was fun. Mostly. One day there was a close call. It was a total accident, and that's what we're there for. As soon as the little girl started to struggle and scream, Dachelle dove into the pool and pulled her out. She got the child on the side, and soon the kid was coughing water out her lungs and bawling in her mom's arms. I didn't think too much of it. After all, it had all ended okay. But that evening, after the chlorine checks were complete, the pool was clean and the changing rooms tidied. No one seemed in the mood for pizza or coffee. "What's up with everyone?" I asked naively. They looked at me in shock. Then they remember. "You're still pretty new here, right?" I wonder what my length of residency had to do with the mood, but answered, "Yes." Dashelle looked at me, her big eyes all serious. "So you don't know about the dead girl?" They proceeded to tell me about a child who had drowned in the pool way before they were even born, around 20-odd years ago. The two lifeguards on pool duty that shift had just started dating, and well, let's say their thoughts and eyes were on each other rather than the job at hand. It was too late by the time they realized the little girl was in trouble, and despite getting her out of the water and doing CPR, the kid was dead before the EMTs arrived. "Okay," I reply, not sure why this is such a mood killer a couple of decades after the fact. I'm waiting for more. The group looked at one another. There is more, I can tell. Finally, Lewis gives in. Every year at the end of summer, the dead girl gets her revenge. A lifeguard always dies in some sort of tragic accident or has a life-changing injury. There's been all sorts over the years: fatal car crashes, supposed suicide, medical mix-ups, serious sporting injuries, even drowning. All ruled terrible accidents, but they all had one thing in common. They were lifeguards at this pool. I burst out laughing. It had to be a joke. Otherwise, literally no one would work there. I said as much, and they all looked serious again. "Didn't you wonder how you got the job so easily?" asked Dashelle. "A job desired by teens all over town, and you just walked into it? It's because no one else wanted it. Except you didn't know better, and us because it was our only option." And, added Lewis, with a bittersweet smile, "Only one of us will die," he said, trying to freak me out and get under my skin. Despite my best efforts, the stupid story got to me. Not enough for me to quit, but I did find myself looking over my shoulder, being extra careful and jumping every time a little girl screamed, which was a lot, although thankfully usually with joy. But as we got towards the end of summer and closer to leaving town for college, instead of getting more anxious, I was so busy and preoccupied with other stuff I forgot all about the stories, which might have been why I so readily agreed to not only cover the late shift, but to lock up once everyone else had left. It was a supervisor's role, but one was sick and the other conveniently out of town. It was a particularly busy day, people making the most of the facilities before the end of summer. I ran off my feet right until the very end as we ushered the last guests out of the gate and got to the cleaning up. I heard various people calling goodbye and clocking out as I did the final kitchen chores, banking, and got ready to lock everything up. I was about to head out the gate myself when I heard a crash coming from the changing rooms. I groaned, not remotely scared, but thinking I must have overlooked something and it was already getting late. The feeling of annoyance soon grew into something else, however, as I entered the changing rooms. Despite the lingering heat of the day and the fact that the pool manager was too cheap to run the AC in there for long, the temperature was like a winter's day in Maine. I could also hear dripping, presuming one of the showers hadn't been turned off properly despite having checked earlier. I headed to the cubicles and almost slipped over. There were puddles everywhere. I knew this area had been cleaned and I checked it. What the hell was going on? Then I heard it, and that's when I started to feel afraid. A child's laugh. The stories about the dead girl came flooding back to me. I heard Lewis's voice. "Every year a lifeguard dies." I hesitated, hovering by the showers. The puddles on the tiles were getting bigger, the laughter louder and louder, echoing around the changing rooms, and I knew I had to check. I stepped into the shower area and pulled across the first curtain when I slipped. Somehow I managed to fall into the shower cubicle and I heard the crack of my skull as I landed headfirst into the hard floor. And as I lie here now, my head at a strange angle, watching my blood trickle across the tiles into the drain, I see a shadow fall over me. I feel her ragged breath. I see the droplets of water fall. And just before it all goes black, I hear her final scream. Have you ever had a job that seemed too good to be true? Did anything otherworldly happen? Was there a price to pay for a role so coveted by others? It's difficult to know the fine line between flattery and deadly obsession, like in this story inspired by Vivienne. It was my first time working the night shift at the local pizza shop in my small town. I would usually have worked the afternoon shifts, but when Delilah quit, my boss asked me to fill in for her. He told us he moved to the city, but it was so sudden and without any apparent reason. It was weird, especially for someone like Delilah, who would have told all of us if she was planning to leave. Still, I didn't mind doing the night shift at first. I mean, I could just chill with my work friends all night and get paid extra. What could possibly go wrong? It was 11:40 p.m. and very slow. There hadn't been a customer or delivery order in over an hour, so me, Javier, and Wyatt were just chatting behind the counter. Javier was talking about his party next weekend while he and Wyatt were cleaning up. When the entrance door opened, we all stopped and turned to see our latest customer. A tall man walked in and just stood there for a second, staring right at me. He shut the door behind him, then slowly walked up to the counter. I couldn't help but cringe as the room suddenly felt icy cold, a stark contrast to the hot summer night. There was something off about this man. I quickly glanced at Wyatt and saw him immediately tense up. The man walked up to the counter and stopped. He just stood there as his icy blue eyes seemed to stare right into my soul. I was unnerved and tried to look away, but his gaze was alluring, captivating, as if he were somehow controlling me. Javier and Wyatt tried to break the tension by continuing to clean the counter. This seemed to startle the man, as he stopped staring at me to look at them, as if he had only just acknowledged that they were there too. Despite his unsettling demeanor, when he spoke, the man elicited a sense of calm. "Just a water, thanks." His voice was deep, pleasing. Somehow the room seemed to become even colder after he spoke. My heart was beating faster as goosebumps appeared on my arm. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Javier and Wyatt suddenly stop too. I knew exactly what they were thinking. "Water? Is that all?" I asked, my voice shaking. He could probably sense my fear as he smiled at me, making me feel slightly better as he nodded his head yes. I turned around and grabbed a bottle, telling him it would be $1. He handed me the money and a piece of paper along with it, then turned from the counter. Confused, I opened it. It read, "You're very beautiful, Vivienne. I'll be waiting." I froze. How did he know my name? I looked up to see him glancing at me just as he headed out the door. Immediately, I showed the note to the guys. They looked at it and laughed, saying it was probably nothing. He just had a crush. Then Javier mentioned he might have seen my name tag. He was right. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I instantly tensed up again as the phone started ringing. The loud, shrill noise cut through the room. We all stared at the phone. It was almost 11:50 p.m. at this point, 10 minutes from closing. Who could possibly be ordering food at this time? We exchanged a look and I answered the phone. "Riley's Pizza, how can I help?" I asked nervously. Silence. "Hello?" I said as Wyatt and Javier eagerly waited for them to say something. At that point, I was extremely tired, so I impatiently said, "If you're not ordering, then stop wasting my time, please." Suddenly, a man with a low, growling voice answered. I took the order and wrote down his address. After the food was ready, I got into my car and drove to the address. This area was slightly quiet, not a single other vehicle on the road, which was rather strange. I parked and immediately noticed that the house had all the windows boarded up. It looked old, as if no one had lived there for a long time. With the pizza in my hands, I slowly walked up to the door as the similar cold sensation from the previous customer came back to me. I was super creeped out, but I tried to keep my composure as I slowly lifted my hand to ring the bell. However, before I could ring it, a tall, scruffy-looking man opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot and had an odd look to them. Slowly, he smiled. A slow, sadistic smile with a demonic, maniacal laugh. If I ever had feared for my life, it was in this very moment. His psychopathic expression was petrifying, causing me to freeze. I was too scared to move. A sound behind him caught my attention and brought me back to my senses. I watched as the same pair of icy blue eyes from before stared at me from behind the man. The sick, deranged look on their faces could only be compared to that of a monster. It was then I realized that the tall, scruffy man was holding a knife. I let out a blood-curdling scream as I dropped the pizza and tried to run for my car. I turned just as he grabbed my arm. "You're not going anywhere," his hissing demonic voice spat out, not sounding remotely human. I kicked the man and managed to break free. He managed to slash me with his knife as I ran back to my car. I jumped in and locked the door, slammed the gas, and drove as fast as I could back to the store as the painful wound on my arm continued to bleed. I looked in my rearview mirror, and to my horror, I saw two men standing in the middle of the road staring at me. I ran back into the store and told Javier and Wyatt what happened. They were shocked after seeing my arm and called the police. The police investigated the house. Inside, they found black candles, occult symbols etched into the walls, and old yellowed paper with disturbing drawings on them. Detective Heron, who led the investigation, found an illustration depicting the man with icy blue eyes, surrounded by hooded figures. The caption read, "The Brotherhood of Eternal Night." Back at the pizza shop, Detective Heron explained that it's a cult rumored to practice dark rituals for eternal life. They believe those men are members. My heart raced. What do they want with me? I asked. It's hard to say, but cults like this often target individuals for their rituals. Be vigilant. They might come back. That evening, while closing the shop, I found another piece of paper on the counter. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. It read, "You escaped once, Vivienne. You won't escape again." Have you ever had a secret admirer? Was there a point it turned dangerous? Were you ever the one who ended up being a little too obsessed with someone? This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Ana Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman.